Well, welcome to another lesson of the Discover Headless Tech course. I'm Marcelo Lewin, the Headless Creator. As always, get a hold of me, Marcelo at headlesscreator.com. Today, my guest presenter is Moritz Gruber, CTO of Caisy, and he's going to show us how to work with multiple tenants inside of Caisy. You're also going to find out what is Caisy all about and how does it work. You'll see it through some cool demos. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get him in and have a quick conversation with him. Moritz, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here. And yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Now, where is here for you?
Stuttgart for me.
Germany.
That's in Germany, southern Germany. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. We're in Southern California, so very different time zones, right? It's the end of the day, beginning of the weekend for you already. It's the
Yeah.
beginning of Friday for us here, so we've got a little time to go. Before we jump into the demo, and you're going to show us a bunch of stuff, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get into technology? You're the CTO at Casey, right?
Yeah.
And one of its
Yeah.
founders.
Yeah. I can combine this a bit with our company story. So I grew up near to Munich, and then to study, I moved to Stuttgart. And I was already into entrepreneurship and startups and everything. So in my first year, I started to build my first website and got more into like the making of things, let's say. And then later in university, met my co-founder Valentino, and that's how we then started developing websites together and grew the business. And then, like with the time when I was like finishing my degree, also wrote a thesis like into the direction of headless CMS and stuff like that. And then we pivoted to not doing a lot of agency business for websites anymore and focusing on the product, the headless system. And to get into that point was because we have worked with multiple systems before. That drove us like into that direction because we thought, hey, there's so many things we could do better. Let's just try. And yeah, that's how it played out.
It's interesting. Your story is very similar to other headless CMSs that started as an agency. It seems many headless CMSs started as an agency doing websites, figuring out what is not working with legacy, and then deciding to. But every agency, right, had their different version of what they didn't like.
I
And in
think,
your case, it's that multi-project, multi-tenancy, right, that you wanted more flexibility with.
yeah, we have worked with other headless CMS before we started ours. I think we're pretty young to like the whole market of headless CMS. So we had the experience to try others before, and so see like the needs to a bit of a later point and drive this into the product. Maybe if you try it out, you can also see that experience there.
Yeah, definitely. Now, we're about to jump into your demo, but before we do that, I'm going to end it with if you couldn't do technology in life, what would be your thing that you do for a living?
I had this conversation like with a friend. If there would be no computers, like a dream of mine would be like born in the age where computers just started, like Steve Jobs days, the first Mac and
Like my
everything.
days, I was born in that
Yeah,
age.
yeah. Or even before, like when there were no technology like that, I would say woodworking would be my thing. Like,
Woodworking. So
yeah.
working with your hands and creating. So do you do any woodworking now?
Yeah, like with my girlfriend a couple of weeks ago, we built something on the weekend together and it was really fun. So yeah,
There you
but I
go.
don't have really a lot of time to
Right.
get professional on that right now. Like, yeah.
I literally grew up through the 80s, right, when the computer revolution started. So I grew up where your wish was, right? I was a kid and my first computer was a Commodore VIC-20, which I still have today. And it's way beyond your time on that. But so I've been through all these revolutions, which is wonderful to have experience, right? But enough of this. I know people didn't come here to listen to this stuff. They want to see your demo. So let's go ahead and show your screen right now. And then for those of you watching live, remember that if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll ask Moritz. Moritz, if I have questions, I'll jump in, but it's all yours, sir.
Thank you. So let's get started to talk about multi-tenancy. I will firstly say that in this demo or talk, I will use our starter template that we have open source, so you can follow along later on. And also practices I'm using, some of them apply to caisy, but there's also a lot in general you can learn about multi-tenancy here, working in the environment. So yeah, there are two main topics I decided to cover. So the first one is how to share a content model with multiple tenants. That use case would be, for example, an agency that has built a marketing page, a blog, an e-commerce site, and they have this model. Like, you always design your page the same, your SEO stuff, an image with text component, and you don't want to rebuild it all the time. So their multi-tenancy can be handy to just duplicating and sharing their content model. More advanced use case, and that's where I brought some examples in to visualize that, is to share content and the model as well. So this is like the more advanced and complex approach. Here in the, sorry for switching, here in the slides, there's this example of a common motors company. Unfortunately, we couldn't use like the real customer data, so I replicated it with some demo projects and just replicating the structure here. But this also has the benefit you can later replicate this your own easier, since we don't rely on any of their code bases. So it's all open source, and afterwards I will share with Marcelo the examples on GitHub. You can try it out yourself. So what I'm showing here is what we call the navigator. There is the main navigation, and then you can jump into the navigator with the top 3 icons displaying your group, your organization, and your project. Like, the organization is like the overall structure, so that would be our big international motor brand or whatever customer you have as an agency that has multiple tenants. In this case, the motor company probably has retailers all over the world, and they have their own website, their own shop somewhere, and they still need to like get online attention to get people into their local stores, for example. There's a similar case if you have like some companies that share in a group some marketing content or whatever, and they are a combined association or something. So here in my example, I have the retailers like Smith, Miller, Davis. They're all around the world, and they share some content from the brand. So for example, there are new models released, they want to show on their website. But also all the retailers are following the CI standards, and the brand is basically providing them with their front end. They have a website, their template that they can choose. So there is a team behind at the brand that manages the front end. And this approach of managing all the tenants here that we cover in our system is really handy for them. Let's go into more technical details here. So this graphic is covering what usually agency does if they have multiple tenants. And then you have just your clients, and you're sharing some components or a full marketing site template with them and reusing them. Your clients won't notice that, but you can build your own automations on top. And then this more complex way of having one project to share the distributed content. I say distributed, this just means we use this project content in all of our tenants, and then we have a template for how the content model should look like. You can combine those, but I would recommend splitting them up. This leaves more flexibility to customize for the editors, but we will see how customization can be implemented later on. Okay, now let's go into our product, and I will show in a demo how such cases work. So we are here on one of those client projects of an agency. I will start with the basic example again first, and then move to the more complicated example. So I will show now the basics of how we can replicate a content model. So we have these clients I set up with the basic blog starter template. We have a page here, page home. They just have a few pages like about, contact, a 404 page. and some blog articles and navigation. It's very simple content model here, but it's enough to demonstrate the concept. On this page, you see, okay, this is like the blog page in the front end, and you can create component here. And we have 6 components right now. That's everything that is set up in our starter template. So let's go ahead and create a new component. I've prepared already like what I wanted to build. So let's add this FAQ component to this template. And here we have the 2 clients. I have grouped them. You can, in our UI, change the names and the UI of those groups as you like. But whenever you want to change something for all of those clients with this approach, I have already set up a webhook that now synchronizes with the SDK. I will come to the code very soon, how this is duplicated. So whenever I change something here in the blog content model, these changes will be reflected on all clients. So we now want to create this FAQ component. We probably want to split it into a FAQ section, then create the FAQ as a component, and finally link it to our page so we can reuse it. Okay, then let's go ahead and create the FAQ section. And I will upload a preview image here for the section. And then in the section, let's define what we need as content. I will choose a string for the title. Let's choose description. Here and save that. Go back and create another component that will be our FAQ component. And we will use the preview image again, so the editor has a nice editing experience. And in here, let's give it headline. Maybe let's add a subheadline for this component. And then we want to have a connection to our sections. So we pick here to have components being linked, and then we select the FAQ section.
So this is a reference field, basically, right? You just added a reference field to the content type, FAQ content type.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool.
And then on the page, we have already the component linking set up. And in here, we have the existing components, and we will add our FAQ component. Now, this is like the top level one. We save that. And then when we go into our clients here, it doesn't matter, like all of those should be in the page now. When we go in here and we click on new component, you see that we now have this FAQ component on client 1. Same goes on client 2. We need a page, so also about should work. And you see the FAQ component we can now create here. And then inside, we can fill in the data for this FAQ component and also create the sections and everything. And this is reflected, of course. Now, if in the client you go into the content model, you can also see that. If you're in such a multi-tenancy environment, you probably don't want to give the client the permission that actually uses this website then. So you just give them the role editor so they don't have access to their blueprint. Before I move to that other example, I will share the code, how we did that, the replication of the content model. So I'm using a Next.js project here, but this isn't something that is Next.js specific. You can do it in SvelteKit or whatever framework you would like to choose. It's just that we import our SDK here, and we need to have some environment variables pre-set up. So I'm just throwing an error if I don't have the necessary environment variables. And what I need here is I need to have the group where my tenants are located in. And this would be the group ID of this client, which you can get if you go on the settings and then copy them. And here, same for the project ID of our template, and then we have a secret so nobody else can trigger that webhook, and we have our personal access token to use the SDK. The personal access token is here required because you access multiple projects, and an API key is usually just targeting one project. So within here, we are listening on 3 particular events. There are other events, like when a document gets updated, you can also listen to that changes and do action on. But right now, for this example, we only want to listen on the creation, the update, and the delete of blueprints. Then when we see this is the right event, we're getting all the projects that where we want to duplicate our content model to. So we get many projects, and then of the current user with our personal access token, which has access to all the tenants. And with this response, we loop through it, and then we duplicate here. And this is very important that you select the template as source and your tenant as basically the input target. And the selection here is we only want to duplicate the blueprints. You can also say, I want to update here the documents, the field history, the locales. We can also previews and other things. But for this example, we just want to duplicate the blueprints. So that covers, and I will share the code public later on, how to duplicate the content model. Let's go to a more advanced example. And here we see how we will distribute content. This is our big common motors company example. So let's imagine we have this retailer. I have chosen the same template for simplicity reasons here. If we go into that here on preview, you see that is like has some own content. Let's say he has these 2 articles, this guy from Berlin, there's another guy from Miami. If we go on his website, it's pretty empty. He just has those 2 as well. So let's change that by going to our distributed content project. You can name that however you like. Later on, if you have a real use case, it's best if you name it domain specific. So whatever that is, if it's newsletter, if it's brand information. So yeah, and I decided to distribute the blog articles. In order to accomplish it, there is some work required in your front end. And in this example, I covered the blog articles. So if I'm, for example, publishing 2 of those draft state articles here, they will then update on the dealer's website. So we now have merged content here. We have 2 articles from those dealers, and we can even go in those articles. And it's like if they published it themselves. So in here, 1 refresh, and then they have those shared articles. You can even update and publish the last article, and then we should see 1 more article here. So yeah, now we go, and this is basically sorted by published date. You can also configure another date for your articles. This all depends on the content model, but I just wanted to provide a simple example on how to have one organization where you have those blog articles, and then you can roll out those content to 1,000 or however tenants you have. In this case, it's the retailers of our motor brand, but it could be also customers that sell completely different things, or it could be also newsletter material or even assets.
Quick question for you. From an authoring perspective, do they get to choose what is shared and where isn't, or how does that, or is this mainly from the back end?
So we have enterprise clients that really want to narrow down who gets to see what and what to do. So there comes in handy building your own UI extensions, and then they can implement their own business logic. For example, let's go in here. I already created a basic example of how that would look like. So you can create in the model a new tab and then say, show this only for the group of tenants. and then you have like, there's this dealer that only does cars, the one that does trucks,
Right.
and then we have the all. And you can extend this page, or you can also cover it here. It doesn't really matter, but there's a lot of flexibility in this approach. So you can put in additional information because your tenants won't have access to this project. You
Right.
can do whatever you like and customize here, and then have like all of that logic then has to be interpreted somewhere else. But you can have the editor who is working for the brand in the online marketing, in the PR, whatever, and then they just click together who is going to see this,
Right.
hit publish, and everything is
And
done.
it goes. Yeah, because I could see this being very handy if, let's say, if we go with the car manufacturer thing, and they write blog articles in general, but they want to publish it only to Southern California audience versus, and they have dealers in Southern California, let's say, versus dealers in Germany, right? For example, I could see that. So that's good. So you have to build this extension basically to the CMS.
For like countries, you could have like a select field here, and that select field just covers all your countries.
Right.
So you say California, or you say, like, you can put all the states in, you can put all the countries in that you support. Doesn't really matter if it's such a simple case. The thing where I mentioned you probably need an extension for, if we need to first gather data from our clients. So let's say you want to first look into the customer relation management tool and see how much revenue the customer is making, and then give them feedback. Okay, if I set the limit for 100,000 per month, who is going to get this article? And then you can give them a preview of, this are all the dealers this blog article will be shown through, based on the data you have in your customer relationship management system. You connect them together with a UI extension, and then you cover those advanced enterprise needs, I would say, if you have like a basic workflow. And this but the beauty of this really is, like, if you have 1,000 retailers, then there is a lot of value created if you just tune a little bit here, because it will be affected on all 1,000. So you can spend the extra money on fine tuning that one project or this one interface, because it had such a huge impact. It will be 1,000 projects or websites that this will have effect.
Yeah, and it's actually pretty cool that you can have the root create new components and then share it with all these dealers if they want to use it or not use it, but at least it comes down almost like a standard across all these branches, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. All right, thank you.
Cool. And further, this gives the flexibility that you can provide login access like to all those dealers, so they can go into their website and they can create their own articles, their own pages. But you from the outside can also access it and support them. And let's say you're like working here, or you are on a completely different project here, and then you have Davis on the call, and you just go here and say, okay, Davis, I'm jumping in. Where are you right now? I will see, okay, you're on the contact page, you want to add something here, then you need this component. And it's really like supporting also the view of like an agency where you have those multiple clients and you want to jump in quickly. And yeah, but there's the same with like an online marketing team in such a big brand, and you have all those clients relying on you. Let's see how this looks in the code base. And again, here, this can be done with any Jamstack framework, I would say. But the trick is that we have two different GraphQL endpoints. We have one for each tenant, the child project, let's say, and we have one for the root data, the shared data. And here we're using GraphQL generation to generate our types. So we have a very type-safe approach, and everything is auto-completed and everything. But the trick is to have two GraphQL clients set up. So when we look into this blog route here, we see that we are fetching the merged blog articles. So if we go down here, we see, okay, we're getting our blog articles from child and from youth, and then we are combining them together. We are filtering out duplicates so that the child is allowed to override articles of the root in this case, and we sort them by publish date. And that's how you accomplish this kind of merged and shared environment where your tenants can work in. So now that we covered the code demo, I will also share the full code base in here. But this brings me to another point that you often have is like in a multi-tenancy environment, you have to onboard new clients. So what we have here in the navigator, when you have to create a new tenant, you just go on create project and then create a new one from existing. So what customers usually does, they have also a foundation for what a client should look like. In this case, I can also choose an existing client and say, okay, I want to create a new client. Let's say this is going to be something in Stuttgart. So we go ahead and say create a new client for Stuttgart, and then we can select what we duplicate. In this case, we probably want to duplicate everything, maybe not the members, because the member of the old tenant shouldn't have access. So, but the webhooks are very important. So we have all our automations and we can carry them along, as well as like tags, views, previews, and such things.
Real quick question on that before you hit continue. It looks like you're gonna also bring in the content. It says that, right? Documents, compose. Those are entries as well, right?
Yeah.
Right. Now, I'm assuming these, you said not members. I'm assuming these content entries are attached to some user that created it. And maybe you're going to show this, what it looks like, but who's assigned to all this new content that is being copied?
This is now copying all the content, and you want to trace it back to whoever duplicated it in the end. So we have writing in the audit log, like who did the duplication, whom from, and then all the authors of the new documents. Like here you see it's now my user.
It's you.
And
got it.
It's a few seconds ago. So we are losing that for a good reason and overriding it so the new tenant will not see what has happened or who did the changes before. So even if you duplicate an existing customer, we are like totally conform with GDPR here. Yeah.
Now with the duplicate members, if you check members as well, does it make a copy of that user into this tenant, or is it just a link to the user database?
So in here we have the users kind of separated. They're not their own content model thing. This also is because we have, and this is very handy in the multi-tenancy, is you go in the organization, you can add members in the organization, which then have access to all groups and all projects as their role they have in the organization. Same if you have somebody who is like only a support person who should only have access to the retailers, you invite them only to this group, and then this will cascade down. And then if you have somebody like the real client, the tenant, you will go here into the members. And then I have, like, for example, assigned here an editor. And then this user, if we would log in with that account, should only or will
see
only
this
see
tenant. Yeah.
This tenant and can only edit the documents, don't have access to the content model and the developer settings, just what he needs to see.
But I'm assuming the administrator that has access to the root level will be able to see this new user as well and manage it if they want to.
Yeah. So I can go ahead and change that user's role and remove it. Yeah.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, perfect. So this sums up all the features that we have to cover with those examples. And this is basically, if we go back to our graphic that we had before, we have the blueprint tenant that I showed with the agency, where you can replicate components to all your tenants. And then we've seen how we use blog articles and share them with all our tenants as well. And this covers both approaches. And a really handy tool is to use the navigator to jump in where you need to jump in, because like the visualization is really important if you have such a large number of projects to manage. This brings me to my summarization. And yeah, I just want to say that it's important, if you have such a use case, to pick the right approach up front, because also the migration of like an existing customer can be really painful, and to change something here because it has such a large impact. And we have experience with like these use cases, and we have this enterprise customers, so we're happy to help with that. And further, if you as an agency come to our system, we have a generous referral program. But first, you can try out our product, go to our website, go on free trial, and then you see, just pick start a template. You can choose exactly what I've chosen here, and then start from the blog in Next.js or Svelte or whatever you like. And I will publish those multi-tenancy examples on GitHub, so you can replicate this using the webhooks feature. All right, I will give it back to Marcelo.
Moritz, that was really great. Very interesting implementation of a multi-tenancy. I could see the power of it, but with great power comes great organization, I think. Not great responsibility, that too, but great organization. I think a company has to be very organized, right? When they're thinking about this, when they're setting up how they're dividing those tenants, right? Because you could also accomplish certain divisions using content models depending on how you're implementing stuff. So you really have to think about that from an enterprise perspective, how you're going to do that, right?
Yeah. So that's not something you just jump straight into code. Like you definitely need to lay out what you want to accomplish. And also like you need to check what kind of permission those tenants will need,
the governance,
and what you restrict them of. Like, for example, are they allowed to publish their own blog articles, or do we want everything to come from the brand? Which, like, can they hide our content in their main navigation?
Like override it, right? Yeah.
Or do we want to override it? And then everything, all those things will lay out how you set up the whole connection of the project and in each individual content model.
So it's really understanding the structure, understanding the governance you want around that structure. So that requires a multitude of people within a company, right, to work together to figure that out. It's not just a developer going like, let's go ahead and just implement this. It requires some careful thinking process.
Yeah, you should definitely involve all the stakeholders. And even if they don't participate in the initial concept, there's a good thing to have them review your draft afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Moritz, if people want to get a hold of you, that email you're showing there is the best.
Yeah, sure. Feel free to reach out via email that you see here, or you can find us on Twitter or on LinkedIn. And if you sign up on caisy, you will also get access to our Discord channel where I'm also available.
Awesome. Moritz, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. Thank you too.
And thanks to the rest of you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did, learn quite a bit. Multi-tenancy is very, very cool concept. So definitely go check it out and learn more about it. All the links will be in the show notes, so you can get them there. And as always, if you want to get a hold of me, Marcelo at headlesscreator.com, and go get your free account if you don't have it yet at headlesscreator.com. So we'll see you on the next lesson. Cheers, everybody.